You're listening to Think. I'm Chris Boyd. Today we're talking about fake bank accounts, stolen mail, private data up for sale on the dark web, and why not much is being done to prevent it. My guest, journalist Kurt Eichenwald, is senior investigative editor at The Conversation, which published his recent article about this under the headline, Heists Worth Billions. Kurt, another really stunning series of crimes related to all this actually happened through one of the financial technology firms hired to administer the Paycheck Protection Program. What is the story of this company, Womply?
Womply was, the government decided that one of the ways they were going to get the money from this COVID fund, which was designed to help companies keep paychecks going to individuals, they decided to hire what are called fintechs. So it's not banks, it's these organizations, these companies that, some of which have been involved in processing these kinds of applications, many of which weren't. And one of the worst in terms of having a background was Womply. And one of the jobs of fintechs was to do a fraud analysis. Well, Womply had never done fraud analysis. They had never processed these kinds of things. And so they were kind of making it up on the fly. And there was an evening in May of, I think it was May of 2021, where the criminal gangs, or it was one criminal gang, figured out that Womply was a disaster. And so they went on, into their communication systems on the dark web and started saying, hit Womply, this is the place to go. Of course, immediately somebody posted you can buy my instruction manual on how to steal money out of Womply, for $50. And that guy was also the guy we saw was also at the same time stealing money out of Womply. And, Womply had such things as you had to do a facial recognition as a password. Well, one of the videos we have in the article shows them having created a 3D model of a head. It looks like something you would see in a very well done animated, CGI. And so what's in the video is the head is, as required, is moving back and forth in front of the system, and the person's holding up a phone connected to Womply where the password is being requested, and it opens. And so you're able to start putting in your application. Womply didn't know how to do fraud analysis. It would process the application, send it to a bank. The bank would pay out the money, thinking all of the fraud analysis has already been done, and it would go to an address somewhere that the criminals had set up, and they stole a huge percentage of what ultimately was, at the last estimate, was $70 billion. And so, this is a lot of money. And the $70 billion, it had to go somewhere. Well, a lot of the money was wired. So it was being wired into drop accounts and then transferred from one drop account to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And eventually money started being withdrawn from all these different accounts. They know how to launder money using drop accounts. And that's why as taxpayers we lost $70 billion.
And you found that nearly 600,000 fraudulent tax refunds were filed in the first 9 months of last year.
Yes, that is the process where they are stealing your identity through the IRS and filing for a tax refund before you do. But except in using your identification, they create fake income, fake expenses. As a result, the refund is very, very large, and refunds are mailed. And so they're stolen they're taken out of the address that they're having them mailed to.
Is there a lot of evidence, Kurt, that many of these crime rings are based in foreign countries? Like, how often does this stolen money end up overseas?
It's hard to know, because it's hard to know. We haven't cracked the scope of what we're dealing with. When people get arrested, it's a very small percentage of the people who are participating in this. But at this point, it is clear that money does go overseas, and that there are international rings, but there are also street gangs. Just in the United States, street gangs are playing a big role. And I saw an indictment, which is not something you would, a kind of indictment you wouldn't normally see, where a series of people were charged with drug trafficking and murder, and I think prostitution was one, and bank fraud. And the bank fraud was all about them committing these crimes where they were using drop accounts. And so there are ways, these are just as profitable at this point as drug trafficking. And so those are domestic. The international rings are more sophisticated and are able to steal a lot more money. And that money has ended up in Poland and Hungary and Austria, and a lot of it has gone to African countries. But how it divides up, how many are international and how many are domestic, it's really at this point, unless we really crack into the scope of these crimes to a more significant degree, we don't know.
The Postal Service, I actually didn't know this, but the Postal Service used to deploy officers to keep an eye on letter carriers, ensure their safety. Why did that practice end a few years ago?
Because the Postal Service decided to end it. I mean, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense. And while they argued, well, the way the law is written, this is what they're supposed to be doing. But they've been, they shifted them over to guarding postal property, like you go to your post office. But forever, they've been protecting letter carriers. And that really came into force in 2000, where the postal police were moved on into the post offices. And that's when the robberies of letter carriers exploded.
Who is ultimately going to bear the costs of all this money stolen this way? If it's not banks that end up on the hook, it's just individuals. And is that group of people who have lost money just too diffuse for any federal agency to really pay attention to this?
Well, a lot of it, probably individuals are the biggest victims, both through direct stealing and through what ultimately is the theft of their taxes. Businesses have had billions of dollars stolen through multiple types of fraud, and government agencies, but not the government agencies that are responsible for dealing with this, but government agencies that distribute money have been robbed. And that's the thing. I mean, it sounds like we're talking about a group of different frauds, and we are, but they're all facilitated by drop accounts. If you didn't have the accounts, you wouldn't have the means of gaining access to the cash. And that's really what it's all about. And it's really why these transactions are exploding. Because once you have a place to put the money, and you can get the money, and you can do it very, very easily, you are free to commit as much financial fraud as you want. And you don't have to go through any sophisticated system to launder it and get it out to you.
Kurt Eichenwald is senior investigative editor at The Conversation. We're talking about his article, Heists Worth Billions. You're listening to Think. I'm Chris Boyd. It sounds like, Kurt, maybe there is work here for Congress. Could they change the regulations required of banks setting up new accounts so that these drop accounts were not so incredibly simple to open?
Well, that's actually the big issue, is the banks, the laws are already in place. And the banks are supposed to have these very strong systems to try and combat this. Well, they do have them, but they are not using them to the degree that you would expect, given the way the law is written. And like I said, everybody in the government knows it. I mean, one of the primary groups that is responsible for dealing with the financial networks and financial fraud and enforcing, the regulatory systems of banks, is called FinTech. Well, the head of FinTech got up and gave a speech where he said, these systems that they're supposed to have in place, really are in paper only. So you read this and it's like, okay, And what role Congress could have? Well, Congress could start calling these people in, banks included, and FinTech and Treasury Department and the comptroller of the currency, the FDIC, all the regulators. They'll say, what the hell is going on? Why do we have this law in place where things are supposed to be happening in such a way to prevent this, and all of you are ignoring it?
So, Kurt, I'm really impressed with the reporting that you and your colleague have done here, but I'm not going to lie, you've given me so much anxiety right now. I'm not sure that I'll be able to go through my regular life. What did you pick up along the way about the things regular people can do to protect ourselves from this sort of thing?
Well, you have to start off by recognizing there's nobody out there to protect. That is just being ignored. But you can protect yourself in many different ways. Number one, people need to stop mailing checks. And it's just simple. There are ways to pay things online. And, everything you can do that is necessary to do that, you need to set that up. If you have to mail a check, if you have no choice, go to the post office. Don't put it in a blue box. Don't put it in a blue box outside the post office. Walk into the post office, because that is protected. Nobody's going to go into the post office to try and steal the checks unless they have a gun in their hands. You need to sign up for a credit rating agency and have alerts in place. And one of the things that they allow you to do is put a lock on your credit. And what that means is if somebody tries to open an account, a credit card, anything in your name, you're notified, and they're not able to do it. People, you don't throw out your financial information. You've got to shred it. You just have to assume that every step of the way, there are people who are trying to get your identity and your financial information. And you have to do what you can to make sure you know what they're going to do. You know how they're going to do it. And follow the ways to protect your cash.
Kurt Eichenwald is Senior Investigative Editor at The Conversation, which published his article, Heists Worth Billions, written with his colleague David Mayman. Kurt, it's always a pleasure talking with you. Thanks for sharing your reporting on this.
Thanks for having me.
Again, I'm Chris Boyd. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.